Well, thank you everybody for joining us today for our Smart Cities discussion. I'm Alfred Sanchez. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome and thank all of our panelists and our speakers and our sponsors for being here with us today, as well as you, our audience. I think it's day 100 million of COVID, so I think we're all about zoomed out. But these discussions have been extremely helpful, especially in light of all of the new times that we are all facing. So obviously technology and smart cities is the wave of the future. Technology has really saved many of our businesses, including the chamber, and being able to pivot into that very quickly. So I'm extremely happy to be able to participate in today's discussion. We're going to hear from a diverse panel of experts who have discussed smart infrastructures and technology solutions that are transforming our cities and improving the overall quality of life for all of us. Today's webinar is presented by our Chamber's New World Center Committee, led by Mitch Biermann, and the Technology and Innovation Committee, led by Juan Carlos, JC, we call him, Cutierrez. It's sponsored by BCDA Aeronautics Solution, Crown Castle, Comcast Business, and Rev Expo Consulting. Special thanks to all of our sponsors. You'll hear from them. It wouldn't be possible doing these webinars and getting out this kind of information without them. So I really, truly appreciate your backing. Before I turn it over to Mitch and JC, I want to run through a couple of logistics about how we do the program. First of all, you'll notice that your microphones are muted. The program is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be available to all participants later on today. Please, we keep the chat box open because part of the chamber is interacting with one another. So we want you to use that to network and interact and drop any information that you might want to share with others into the chat box. We will have time for questions and answers as usual. And to do that, we ask you please to drop your questions in the Q&A tab. It's important because that's what's going to be floated up to our panelists. If you write them in the chat, we're probably going to miss them. So please make sure that you get them into the Q&A and they'll be floated up at the appropriate time. Now, it's my pleasure to formally introduce and welcome both Mitch and JC. Mitch is the Miami Office Managing Director at Weiss, Serota, Helfman, Cole, and Biermann. Mitch has been involved with the Chamber for many, many years and has also served as the chairman of our Transportation Committee. Mitch represents major international companies in the transportation, environmental, solid waste, engineering, and construction industries in government affairs and administrative law matters. He is an extreme talent and extreme wealth of information, and we're very lucky to have him. JC Cutierrez is a global executive with more than 2 decades of experience in information technology and business consulting. He's currently the head of LATAM Solutions Architecture and Customer Success at Amazon Web Services. And he's been the CEO and managing partner at Rational 7, which is a digital consulting firm that focused on business transformation, applying big data, analytics, AI, IoT, and cloud technology. He was previously a managing director for technology consulting with PwC, where he led digital consulting for the U.S. He's a former group vice chair of Oracle Corporation and has been involved with the chamber for many, many years. He's brought many connections with important technology companies such as Microsoft, SAP Latin America, to name just but a few. So we're very lucky to have him. So now, without further ado, let me introduce Mitch Biermann for his welcoming remarks. Mitch, thank you very much for all you do. The floor is yours.
Alfred, thank you so much. And I also want to thank my co-presenter, JC Cutierrez. We've been working on this for a long time. And I want to thank Stephanie and Tanya, who really did all the work, which was amazing and in order to make this happen. As I said, I've been thinking about this topic for a really long time since I took over the New World Center Committee. And I think increasingly, the mission of the New World Center Committee, which has always been on the development of the downtown core, is moving over into looking at how these technological changes affect life, work, and recreation in the center of our city and make all of that possible. And in my work as an attorney and as an advocate, I've seen over the 30 years I've been in practice, I've seen the growth of database solutions in providing virtually every type of public service that government provides, and going way beyond what government provides. And so we have a unique moment in our history where the private tech sector and government share responsibility for the provision of public services and for creating new public services that make life more convenient, more sustainable, and more fun, I think. So I'm really excited about the panel that we've assembled. Some of the panelists here are from clients that I'm proud to represent, like Crown Castle, and I'm very excited about what they're doing, and I think that everything that we learned today is going to have long-term benefits to us as we go forward and we explore these things further, and we collectively as a community come up with the new ideas which will drive the next wave of technology for providing a better urban life. Thank you very much. JC, you're still muted. Can somebody yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Alfred, also for your introduction. Thank you, Mitch, for the collaboration. It has been great to work together in preparing this panel. And also Stephanie, Tanya, and all the staff, thank you for preparing all this and putting all the ideas together. From the beginning, we have been looking for this panel from the beginning of the year. As part of the goals of the Technology and Innovation Committee, we established different targets of content for the year. We prepared early on a panel around 5G. Also, we did one around blockchain, virtual reality, augmented reality. But this one, we were looking forward to have the smart cities because it's kind of a consolidation of all these emerging technologies and the impact it could have and is having in Miami and in South Florida. From the point of view of technology, cities like Miami are looking for platforms capable of handling the rapid pace of innovation, and they need to custom and personalize the work. Once the solutions are implemented, communities need to scale for additional functionalities after the initial deployment. That is super key. It's not only one-time project, it's also how this technology evolves. And cities digitally transform and deploy smart capabilities to support positive environmental, financial, social outcomes, and improve efficiencies. They require platforms, networks, and people to ingest, analyze, predict, and control data, especially the ones that are coming from the IoT devices. All these we're gonna be talking today with the panel, but especially I want to thank the sponsors that we have today, and I will like to introduce them. I'm gonna name them first, and they will do some sponsor remarks. First of all, Angel Lovera, who is the COO for BCDA Aeronautical Solution. Michael Flynn, Director for Market Development from Comcast Business, and Malcolm Eve, Manager Public Affairs for Crown Castle. So thank you, Angel, Michael, and Malcolm. And if you could join now and give us your sponsor remarks, please.
Hi, JC. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and hope you guys are all doing well and safe from the coronavirus. And I want to, first of all, like I said, thank you very much for the opportunity to sponsor an event like this. And I've been looking forward as well to speak to everyone. BCDA Aeronautical Solutions, we're an aviation company based in Florida that our goal is to, like you said, is to develop systems and develop software with you day-to-day or the use of technology that people are accustomed to use, because innovation is not just only a technology or a device, it's also process. So our main goal is to provide airports and provide airlines and private operators in Miami and broad tools so they can be better managers, they can be better operators. And just to have a brief background of our company, our team is compressed of more than 30 professionals between aeronautical engineers, technical engineers. We have electronic and computer science engineers, as well as pilots and a bunch of lawyers and accountants that work together to make this possible. And I want to thank you very much, all you guys, and I hope that we can discuss a couple of topics on our end. We'll be talking a little bit about how this technology and how we can influence and make airports smarter to contribute to the cities and contribute to the countries and make it, you know, a better, smarter place for all to be. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angel. And now I would like to introduce Michael Flynn, who is Director for Market Development with Comcast Business. Michael.
Thank you, JC. Thanks all so much. We do have a slide I think will be up in a second. You know, interestingly enough, when we think about smart cities, I couldn't help but go back and reflect just a second on where Miami was. And it was 56 years ago, 1966, that the formulation of the public library system was completed. And now we have 50 libraries around the community, including two mobile units and one tech bus, which is fascinating when you think about our lifespan. The folks on this call and are enjoying this presentation, and thanks again to the Chamber for putting this forward. And now we have this mesh network of super, you know, intelligent fiber talking to each other and talking to computers and enabling not only your home, but your office. And then, as you can see on the presentation, the buildings of grand scope, which are really exciting when I think about what's happening in downtown in the Brickell area of Miami, that everybody has an opportunity and has the need and the desire to learn and to be a part of their community in a real way. And so we're putting together the foundation, the pieces from a Comcast business perspective that not only enable it for today, but also for our future. So just a couple of points I just make. If you look at the bottom of the slide, we're not doing this alone. We not only are partnering with great organizations like the Chamber, but within technology with a partner, Machine Q. So if you're one of the fortunate folks who happen to live and work in one of the large Class A beautiful buildings in downtown Miami, we are connecting various sensors and systems to support that, so that things can happen more independently, right? So you don't have to be reminded of things. And that's where the smart city concept really starts to shape and take hold for us. We also are you know, using in that process, you know, some Wi-Fi capabilities. It's just, you know, masterful, and the ability not only to communicate within your home or your office, but also your building and then into the city proper. So that you can carry those that needed communication and do the things that we're doing, right? Who would have known that in 2020, and I think probably all of us did a view 20 or 30 years ago, what would 2020 be like? Nobody, I guarantee you, had what was in store for us in 2020 today. But from a Comcast business perspective, just to kind of finish it out for you, we're there for you. We are literally building the foundation of the smart city concepts and what we do and how we enable you to communicate. And, you know, forget the Ks, forget the megabits. We're full on into gigabit transport and network that is fully supportive and looking to future-proof that with a lot of fiber that we're building throughout the community. So, and we're involved in a lot of projects where you are and where you're working from. And again, just want to say thank you so much to the team at the Chamber. And my name's Mike Flynn. If I can do anything for you with Comcast Business and our market development team, please reach out to me when able and as often as able, and we'll get that taken care of for you. So thanks again. Great to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Michael. And now I would like to introduce Malcolm Eve. He is a manager in the public affairs area for Crown Castle. Malcolm, sorry, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Malcolm Eve. I'm the Public Affairs Manager for the South Region of Crown Castle. Just a little bit about Crown Castle real quick. We are the nation's largest provider of shared communications infrastructure with our assets of roughly 40,000 cell towers across the country, approximately 70,000 small cell nodes on air or being constructed, and approximately 80,000 route miles of fiber, again, across the United States and Puerto Rico. We are helping laying the foundation and providing the critical infrastructure that will bring about 5G, the next generation of cell phone communications, again, across the United States. And I think as the panel will discuss later, 5G is going to be critical for bringing many cities into what we call that smart cities realm with the Internet of Things, mobile devices, autonomous vehicles, things of that nature. We also are critical in working with jurisdictions, communities across the country when we deploy our infrastructure. We do it transparently, and we do it in constant consultation with the many areas of the country that we live and work in. In addition to that, we aren't just installing infrastructure. We also are vital. We are trying to make partnerships with communities that we live and work in. Crown Castle has a robust program called Connected by Good, where we endeavor to engage with various nonprofits across the country in any number of efforts. So we're not just building your communities, but we live in your communities and we care about your communities, and we're involved in making communities more vibrant. As I close, I just want to acknowledge Jeff Hanna, who you'll hear from later. He's with Crown Castle, our business development. He'll be able to introduce himself. Also wanted to point out Jessica Fernandez, who's on the call as well. She is our government affairs manager for the state of Florida and Puerto Rico. And again, just want to thank the Chamber for the opportunity. We're happy to be sponsors. I would invite anyone, if you want to learn more about what Crown Castle is doing in the state of Florida or across the country, feel free to reach out to me at malcolm.eve@crowncastle.com. If you want to get a little more bird's eye view of what we're doing in the great state of Florida and in South Florida in particular, please feel free to reach out to Jessica Fernandez at jessica.fernandez@crowncastle.com. Again, happy to be a sponsor, looking forward to the conversation today, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Now I would like to introduce the moderator of the panel, Dr. Susan Amat. Dr. Amat serves as the Executive Director of GEM, Accelerate, and she's the VP for Education at the Global Entrepreneurship Network, GEM. GEM operates in 170 countries, celebrating and connecting entrepreneurs, ecosystems builders, and policymakers. She is also the founder of Venture Hive, an entrepreneur education company, and Flee the Path, a SaaS solution that provides accountability and transparency tools and content to support innovation management and entrepreneurship programs in Fortune 500 businesses. After completing her MBA, Dr. Amat developed pediatric health monitoring products and earned a PhD in strategic entrepreneurship. While teaching at the University of Miami, she founded the Launch Path, which was considered the top model in entrepreneurship education. Dr. Amat served as the founding chair of the STEM board for Miami-Dade County Public Schools and as a trustee of Miami-Dade College. In 2012, Dr. Amat was honored as a champion of change at the White House. It is my pleasure to introduce you, Dr. Amat, and we are really happy at the Chamber to count with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, JC. And it's really my pleasure to get to serve our community in this way. I love the Chamber. So many wonderful things have come from relationships there. And I'm so happy that we're being brought together for an event like this. And I think smart cities is really such an important topic of our time, because now that everyone's online, I think people are understanding the need for infrastructure and thinking through better ways of communicating and getting together. And our governments, I'm very privileged to serve in some of our local government boards about recovery and seeing the kind of data we need and how we're now scrambling to get some of it. It's been a wonderful topic to continue, especially bringing the community in like this. So guys, today we have an all-star panel representing many different perspectives on the need for smart cities. But as I introduce the topic, I want you to think through some of the big myths that people still are thinking that smart cities has, which makes it a really challenging and big topic to overtake. And our conversation today is really going to be about breaking down some of those myths, sharing some of the incredible expertise in our community, and then kind of pulling it back into what, as South Floridians, we should be thinking about and things we can do to keep the movement and conversation moving forward. So I'm going to give you 4 big myths, and then our wonderful panel is going to help make sure it's debunked and give you the education you need to keep us moving. So number 1, a lot of people think smart cities initiatives are really expensive, but you're going to hear today lots of interesting creative ways that things have been implemented. And there are countless examples all over the world where with very little upfront cost, people have just tried doing new things and it's worked and it's given better information, communication, etc. Number 2, a lot of people think smart cities are all about technology, but in reality, technology is simply the enabler. Smart cities are all about people, and it requires a human-centered mindset and approach. And we have some great people who are going to be sharing those examples today as well. Constantly in the literature, you're hearing that smart cities are about these massive, complex metropolitans that take over and really want to do things at massive scale. But in reality, 30% of smart city projects are in areas with a population of 150 or less. And some of the really interesting projects are being done in small towns, 5,000. So it really gives us pause and great opportunity because we have so many people who are thinking big and want to contribute to making our community better. So utilizing some of the easy pilots that are being done in other places can really propel us continuously. And finally, and this is going to be a really fun conversation today, most people think Smart Cities project can only be facilitated by government leaders. But the Center for Digital Government found that only 25% of smart city deployments are being led by government officials. So although we have our illustrious leader, Art Noriega, on the call today, all of us are now empowered to be part of this movement. So without any further ado, I'm excited to introduce our panelists. What we're going to do is one by one, they're going to introduce themselves and give you a little bit of background on their experience, what their companies are doing, and then we'll go into some questions and really get to the heart of the matter. So let's start with Jeff Hanna. Welcome. Jeff Hanna is the Business Development Manager, and he runs corporate strategy and business for Crown. So we're super happy to have you, Jeff. Can you introduce yourself and Crown to us a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Really happy to be here. I want to thank the Chamber, City of Miami, and Greater Miami-Dade metro area for being one of Crown's marquee markets in terms of our shared infrastructure assets. Looking forward to a really good conversation today. Just a little bit about me. I'm not based in Miami, even though this background was probably filmed there. But I'm corporate. I do business development and corporate strategy with Crown Castle, with a focus on smart community infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Captain Lovera, we're so happy to have you.
Thank you very much, Susan. And yes, just a little brief. Like I spoke before, we're actually working on a suite of products, a suite aim of products that is looking to provide a couple of mobile apps and mobile devices that, like you said, people or operators can use together to make their airport smarter. And it doesn't have to be expensive. And I'll go out to that later. And I'll let you guys know that we actually think that we can start doing this with zero cost.
Yeah, all of us like ROI, clarity, and value for money. So I'm very excited to talk about the efficiency and inexpensive side of making these things happen. Amri Tarsis is the IoT Regional Manager for Cisco, and he has great stories to tell. So we're so happy you could be here with us.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks for having me on this conference. It's a pleasure to be here. For us, smart cities is something that can bring efficiency and, of course, make the city more enjoyable for the citizens. I'm fortunate to be part of Cisco for a long time, engaged in smart city projects in Colombia, Canada, and US, have been part of projects in street lighting, smart parking, smart grid. In the end of the day, like you said, I think that what makes the city really smart is the ability to apply the technology in a way that we can really change the way that we interact with the city.
Perfect. I'm so happy you're here. I cannot wait to hear your case studies. Phil Silver, he's the leader for transportation, state and local government for Amazon Web Services. Phil?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Susan, and thank you to the Chamber for inviting AWS to participate on this panel. We are delighted to be here. At AWS, I look after our activities in the transportation vertical, which is a linchpin of any smart city solution. I live in San Diego today, but I grew up in Miami Beach. I went to North Beach Elementary School, so it's nice to be sort of home.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, our City of Miami City Manager, Art Noriega. Thanks for joining today.
Hey, Susan, thanks a lot. It's always a pleasure to participate, especially with you know, my own long personal history with the Chamber, and these kind of forums provide a lot of resources and information and background and context to kind of what's going on in our community, and especially obviously since we've entered into this strange new world we're in from a pandemic perspective, and the recovery that's almost inevitable, you know, coming on off the backside of this. With a city the size of Miami, and you know, I've been on the job for 6 months. It's a unique task because sometimes government doesn't. You know, we're always sort of tend to lean on this idea that we are sort of at the forefront of innovation and ideas. A lot of times that goes contrast to the bureaucratic image we have. But you kind of touched on it, Susan. You know, a lot of times our biggest and best role is to embrace it and sort of get out of the way and let it happen and be a facilitator. A lot of the innovation that happens, especially in our city, our role in that is going to be to really be a facilitator and try to make sure that a lot of this innovation is implemented from a perspective of you know, quality of life and sustainability and resiliency. And as a city, we just got to make sure we're not an impediment to that. So that's one of the key things that we're going to really focus on in terms of recovery. A lot of the pandemic has accelerated a lot of what we've been wanting to do, I think, over the last couple of years, and it really provided, I think, the one few opportunities and bright spots is that we're able to sort of get ahead of some things that were really kind of dragging a little bit and lagging in terms of our smart city platform.
Thank you so much, Art. And with that, let's jump right into kind of understanding everyone's perspective. And this will be a very dynamic conversation because this is a huge topic. And we want to make sure everybody who's on this call today, we want you to become advocates for smart cities leaving this call. So please put your questions in. This is your event. We want to hear from you what doesn't make sense, what you need additional clarification on. There's going to be lots of time for Q&A. So with that, let's jump in. We're going to start with Amri. I would love to hear a little bit more about Cisco's approach to smart cities and how IoT plays a role in that. And then we're going to jump to Phil and hear about it from the AWS perspective. Cool?
Yes, thank you, Susan. When we started thinking about smart cities, I think that the first challenge was connectivity. When we think about IoT, it's not necessarily a broadband connectivity. We just have a simple sensor that needs to be very efficient in how the sensor use the energy to be powered by a battery and stay there for 10 years. for example, right?
Emery, let's take a step back. Can you explain what IoT is?
Yes,
and then
sure.
how that layers into the larger conversation about smart cities?
Okay, so the name IoT comes from the Internet of Things. Everything technology, including the existence of Cisco, started with the router and the internet. More and more, we realize that will be beneficial to be connecting things. So about 10 years ago, we started having a kind of an innovation with different kind of sensors applied to smart homes, any kind of a smart system in manufacturing, oil and gas, and etc. And in the end, in the city, in a more wide space. So it's very common to see sensors today monitoring, for example, the level of water in canals or making lights more automatic to be monitoring the consumption of energy and turn on, turn off. It's very common to have smart traffic to prioritize eventually a kind of a firefighter vehicle, for instance. So we have all these possibilities that starts with the connectivity, but in the end of the day, it's how we use the data, how we leverage this information to bring to the upper layers and create what we call smart cities, how to make cities more efficient with the data that we are gathering with all these different sensors.
And so I know that Cisco has had this as a focus initiative for years. Can you tell us kind of where it started and how that strategy has evolved over the last few years, especially with you in the helm?
Well, one of the interesting milestones to enable cities is the first problem to solve was exactly the connectivity, because when we think about it, cellular connectivity or Wi-Fi, the technology was designed for broadband. So in the beginning, it was about how you create new protocols, new kind of networks that it's available today to be more efficient on the connectivity of those sensors. So let's say that nowadays we are in a kind of a mature state that we do have different flavors of connectivity to address any kind of a possibility. What we learned is that technology is one problem to solve, but in the end of the day, in the beginning we had this vision that cities, smart cities will be something like getting all the data from all different sensors and bring together to one single control center. That's not the reality. In the end of the day, what we have is some sort of islands of excellence, specific areas in the city that innovation is flourishing and getting traction and being implemented. Nowadays, what we see is that we have a lot of smart systems in the city, and we have to bring this data together. So now the problem to solve is no longer the connectivity. We still have to connect what is unconnected, but the next phase, let's say, it's going to be how governments provide open data, how the technology make the data available, and how the entrepreneurs or companies make sense of this data.
That's true. And it's a great topic. I'm excited to hear from the AWS side exactly what's happening there, because you guys are the holders of the data. So please, Phil, enlighten us. Where did AWS start with thinking through a strategy for smart cities, and where are you guys now?
Sure. Well, I love how Cisco speaks to the challenges of connectivity and solving for them. What the cloud does is enables all that data to be integrated into data sets and data lakes that allow what was traditionally siloed data that resided in on-premises systems that couldn't be connected to others to now start to intercommunicate. And Miami, at least in the transportation area, is a great example of a city on the move to do this. I'll give some examples. Miami International Airport, and of course this is all pre-COVID, is on a $5 billion, 5 to 15 year capital improvement program. as part of an industry trend that addresses the fact that IATA, the Air Travel Association, predicts that air travel will grow by over 100% over the next 18 years. That means 8.2 passengers by 2037. So Miami International Airport's on the front end of this in order to prepare itself both from a capital infrastructure point of view and from a data infrastructure point of view for that. And the cloud plays a role in delivering that. Miami-Dade Transit Authority is rapidly innovating on improving the traveler experience with the recently launched new mobile app, Go Miami-Dade Transit. It encompasses features that include tracking, trip planning, mobile passes, and a really innovative rewards program powered by Cubic Corporation's loyalty rewards system, Cubic Interactive. The Miami-Dade Transportation and Public Works Department just recently awarded Siemens Mobility a $150 billion contract to provide an advanced traffic management system which will upgrade 2,900 intersections and traffic corridors with intelligent software and technology, also powered and integrated on the cloud. And finally, Miami-Dade Expressway, working along with the Florida Turnpike Enterprise, is embarking on a modernization and replacement of the SunPass system. By number of transactions, over 2 billion, this is the largest toll collection system in the world. So all of these activities are happening. The real challenge and why they're important is how Miami deals and actually how citizens in Miami actually see the benefit of all these activities. And Miami is dealing with rising congestion and traffic fatalities. According to the Texas Transportation Institute, Miami-Dade's annual total delay was 4th in the United States at 266 million hours. That's 69 hours per commuter per year, costing the region $5.3 billion in congestion costs. So when you talk about cost and relieving costs, here's an area where we're already investing in a suboptimal area. That accounts, by the way, to $1,412 per Miami resident. And that's on top of $3 billion in medical and work costs per year that residents of Florida bear in fatalities. And here's what matters. The cloud was established to provide an alternative way for data to be integrated, maintained, delivered, for organizations to modernize, build resiliency against the kind of events that Houston is feeling today, and to achieve significant cost savings over traditional ways of doing this. And all of these activities, when they are complete and unified with some of the architecture that the cloud can provide, should provide great benefit to the residents of Miami-Dade.
Thanks, Phil. And I love the examples and really the focus on efficiency and cost savings. And we're going to circle back on that as a panel, but that was a really great intro to the AWS approach. So thank you. Next up, Jeff, I would love to hear about the importance of the connectivity piece to why smart cities and the infrastructure requirements, because as I said in the intro, it just seems like it's so expensive and so massive to take on an implementation, but in reality, there's ways to do it in pieces. So the private value add, public versus private, can you kind of synthesize exactly how it all makes sense so that we can all articulate the larger understanding to normal people?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think this is kind of a great slot for my segment between Anne-Marie and Phil, because I mean, on one end you have the sensors, you have the network components in terms of the routing and switching, and then you have the cloud, which is the data repository or data lakes for all of this information. But none of these kind of work independently. So it's incredibly important to have robust connectivity infrastructure and the networks associated to enable all of these applications, whether it be IoT sensors that are connecting wirelessly, or whether it be data repositories that governments and the private sector are accessing to make better decisions informed by data. all of that relies on the connectivity infrastructure in between. And so when you talk about kind of, the costs and the enablement, Crown's a very unique company in the sense that we're a shared neutral host, meaning we're agnostic to the provider or tenant within our infrastructure. So we have 80,000 fiber route miles that's connecting enterprises, governments, whether it be state or local, even on the federal level. Those are all getting connected into cloud on-ramp locations. So essentially where users of AWS might be accessing their data lakes or their mobile apps that are back-ended through AWS. And in terms of that shared infrastructure, mobile network operators as well. So when you talk about transit apps, those are all being, fulfilled through LTE connections or Wi-Fi. Those are all being terminated into wireless connections and accessing the World Wide Web, if you will. So infrastructure from a connectivity perspective is incredibly important. The shared infrastructure model becomes much more economically advantageous for multiple parties. From the mobile network operator perspective, in terms of working with a provider like Crown to get that infrastructure that they need for the coverage and capacity within markets such as Miami. From a government perspective, you can go out and build private networks for government applications, but is that really the kind of the best use of funding, or is there an opportunity to leverage what's already in the ground, what's already existing, to essentially apply more application or funding to the applications being used? So from a shared neutral host perspective, we're as Crown, we're very open to kind of how can we connect whatever it is that you're looking to connect. And from the public sector perspective, our infrastructure is out there for mobile network operators, or if they're 4G and 5G network build out. But those also become points of presence for IoT sensors, whether it be environmental sensors, traffic sensors, water level sensors. The list kind of goes on in terms of the aggregation point for a number of those sensors and applications.
Perfect, Jeff. Thanks for kind of tying it together a little bit more clearly for everyone, because it's such a huge topic. So with that, let's take it now down to Mr. Noriega. It'll be wonderful for us, for all of that information that was just shared by the other panelists. How does that then go into a strategy for the city of Miami?
So obviously for us, being smart is really so much more than just technology and sensors. It's about, sort of that people-driven approach.
Yep.
We really are engaged in sort of evaluating the analytics, process improvement, policy improvement, all of those that are sort of people-driven, because we're trying to obviously create a better place to live and a better environment for our residents and our business owners. The whole focus for us is to just solve problems, right? So, for us, some of our major focuses have been public safety, right? We do a lot on the technology side as it relates to our policing and how we manage that, which has been incredibly valuable through our ShotSpotter program, our real-time crime center. We have a very robust camera system that we monitor and use as a resource. And it was especially useful to us, obviously, when we started to have protests and we needed to sort of manage resources and how to deploy personnel to sort of, react and address it. And I think in a lot of ways, that's why we had a kind of a smooth transition through that. We weren't overly impacted because we didn't have to show force if we didn't need to, right? We could have our resources deployed kind of on the perimeter, and then as we monitored the situation and had a better overall assessment, and that technology was integral to that. We also obviously, from a government implementation standpoint, have really expedited some of the processes in terms of the digital platform for us as we got into COVID, and we had to shut down some of our businesses and had a lot of our employees work remotely. We went to a lot of digital platforms. In particular, we did a robust sidewalk cafe program because obviously we're shutting down dining rooms. So we needed to create an opportunity for some of these businesses to use some of our public right of way. That application process was totally digitized. So, we didn't have to have them physically come to a location. It expedited that process incredibly. And so that was a huge issue. Our business tax receipt program, some of our relief efforts, our rental assistance program, all of that was done through a digital platform. So those are all things that weren't in place robustly, I think, prior to our current situation with the pandemic. And then we out of necessity, we needed to sort of implement them. You know, from a transportation perspective, obviously we were very heavily involved in a lot of micromobility going in to our current situation with scooters and mopeds. One of the things that we did with our scooter program, because it was a pilot, was we really focused on a platform mobility data standard, and it allowed us to sort of track the analytics of how scooters were being deployed, right, where our heat maps were, where our hotspots were in terms of use. And then that translates, you know, as an example to how do we deploy trolleys to complement that, right, and our trolley route service. So those are all ways in which we've been sort of able to take sort of that smart cities approach and actually use it in terms of practices. And that's all going to continue to evolve for us as we continue it, because our overall city strategy has a heavy smart cities component to it, as well as a resiliency component. And resiliency for us is not just about, you know, sea level rise and climate change. Resiliency is about economic resiliency, right? Resiliency against pandemics, as an example. How do you insulate your city from future potential impacts? And they could be at a lot of different levels. And the smart city platform is a really incredibly useful tool in that.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Captain Lovera. I'd love to hear more about BCDA and understand, especially, you know, Art ran the parking authority for years. And so what he brought to the city of Miami was fascinating, because there was this really deep understanding of what could be really interesting, innovative solutions. And now when we're thinking about flight and airports, I'd love for you to hear more about the kind of work you're doing on the ground and where big transformation is happening from the smart cities mindset in airports.
Thank you very much, Susan. Yes, like everybody's been saying, there's a key thing here. There's a key element that everybody has been on, is that teamwork is really necessary to achieve goals, or to achieve, if you want a city to be smarter, if you want a country to be smarter, if you want an organization to be smarter, teamwork is the key element. So basically what we're doing is a little bit what we're working with Amazon Web Services, we're working with connectivity, we're working with infrastructure, and we're trying to put all those things together and give it a little touch of innovation so we can bring solutions like Art did, like you're saying in Miami, like parking solutions. And we've adapted it to airports. And not only airports, Susan, because in our case specifically, BC Aeronautical Solutions is focused on aviation and airports, but we can also do that or translate it to ports as well. So let me just share my screen real quick, and I'll try to get right into business so everybody can see what they're talking about.
I'm gonna cut you off though if you go too far, sir. Okay.
No, don't worry. This is gonna be really quick. So basically what we're doing is that I think that to be smart, you have to be, there's a couple of elements that you have to be. You have to have integration, you have to have flexibility, and you have to have efficiency. You have to be, our systems or the systems that we develop or the innovation tools have to be capable of integrating with existing technologies nowadays. And they have to be also flexible to provide changes and functionalities and redesign without having to trash everything and come back over. And they have to be efficient. They have to be low cost. So when we're talking about our solutions, for example, we have a couple of mobile platforms with mobile devices, for example, PaxAIMS or PXAIMS or Fuel AIMS or Air AIMS. We provide like sensors, if you would say, that we can collect all the information, because at the end of the day, what we really want to do is present the information to the managers that have decision making in the decision process. And we not only want to give them the information, we want to give them the correct information, the correct analytics, because if not, it's going to be overwhelming. So for example, we've have mobile devices like used on theme parks to scan barcodes that you can scan passengers on the port of Miami, or you can scan passengers on the airport. And if the light goes out in the airport, if you have some kind of infrastructure deficiency, you can use that and it'll still go to the cloud with Amazon Web Services and be available and information in real time. And you can be able, or you can be capable of running your city from one location or multiple airports in multiple cities or in the whole country in just one place. And then we have as well solutions for digitalizing contracts and invoicing systems that all integrate to a payment platform. Because e-commerce, as you know, is also a very growing business, and people are very used to that. And one of the things I really appreciate about Miami was the parking, that you can actually pay, you can pay with your phone real quick. So it's not only just providing the information, it's also providing the tools for payment. So it has to do with a lot of teamwork. There's connectivity, there's infrastructure, there's Amazon Web Services. There's a lot of things going on to make this happen. Let me just refresh the screen real quick. So basically, in EVCD Aeronautical Solutions, we have demonstrated, and I don't know if I have enough time, I can give you a case study.
You have 30 seconds.
But yeah, but basically we can go a bit later. But what we do really is we connect a little of what everybody has been talking about today, and we try to do a teamwork and provide tools that are available today. They're not super expensive. They're not overwhelming. They're processes and technologies that we use today to make smarter cities, make smarter airports, and make a smarter country. Thanks, Susan.
Perfect. Wow, that was such a nice bow at the end.
I don't know. I tried to be as precise and not to be that complicated, but basically that's it.
That's great. So we're coming back to Amory now. So I'm going to ask a couple of people on the panel the next few questions so we get some diversity of perspective here. So what implementations do you think will yield the biggest impact for South Florida? And I'd love for you to give us a case study and help us understand what are the metrics for success with projects like that. So it's not just here's a big splashy project to announce, but when do you, what are the measurement variables that we look for to decide if it was successful or not? So can you walk us through a case study and what do you think will work well here?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I agree with Phil on the transportation use case. I think that eventually we don't have that during the coronavirus right now. It's not a big issue, but moving forward, it's gonna be an interesting ongoing issue and problem to solve, right? I also agree with Art on the public safety. I think that both of them are the major problems for cities overall. As I live and love Miami, I live in Miami and I love the city. I think that one of the challenges that we do have here is this ongoing threat of hurricanes and storms. And today, eventually, the technology can help us to have a better evacuation routes and to optimize our evacuation routes and things like that. I think that nowadays the technology can be applied to monitor floating areas, things like that. One of the use cases that we have in Port of Rotterdam is making the vision that they have there, it's to make the port the same idea that we have autonomous vehicles. They want to have autonomous ships. They want to have the flow of ships in the port in a more automatic way. And one of the interesting challenges that they do have, it's how they monitor the water level, actually to get permission to specific ships to go in and out. I think that in the Internet of Things, this is something that is really helping customers to achieve that kind of, or cities to achieve that kind of efficiencies. If you think about Miami, it's one of the areas that we have a lot of activity on that for being a hub for importation and exportation. So probably it's an area that we may have a good impact in the city as well. So that kind of technology can be applied in both ports and also eventually helping us to monitor floating areas in the city.
That's interesting, especially as we have this ongoing conversation about sustainability and sea level rise. So it's definitely for a commercial use, but then there are many, many other needs to assess with that. So that's fascinating. Phil, same question. I'd love for you to talk about what implementations will really show a huge ROI for South Florida. And if you can address the metrics component, that would be awesome.
Sure, and I'll talk about a journey of one of our customers who initiated a process to stabilize, modernize, build resiliency into their platform, at the same time saving costs. And I'm going to talk about Elizabeth River Crossings, which is a toll authority that operates in Norfolk, Portsmouth, Virginia area. They have 2 tunnels and about 52 miles of highway. And about a year ago, they were operating out of 2 data centers that were about a mile apart. One of them below the existing water line in Norfolk, Virginia. And their costs to operate their data infrastructure were about $1 million a year, give or take. I'm not sure the exact number, but I do know what they've saved. Their first step in terms of consolidating how they work was to move all of that data to the cloud. From a backup point of view, they were able to eliminate a second location, and they were able to start connecting all their assets much more effectively. One of the things that I think you should get from today's panel is that there's no one organization that does it all. Cisco is providing the connectivity, for example, so that we can connect devices at the edge and have them provide value to the cloud through the data that gets transmitted to it and through that mechanism to citizens. That's basically what ERC did. First, moving their technology to the cloud, then modernizing it with a new contact center, and now replacing an existing legacy back office with a new one that is written completely to run on the cloud. So they've invested about $250,000 in this process over the last year to avoid an infrastructure refresh cost of $500,000, and are saving $200,000 just by making these 3 or 4 relatively modest steps that transition the way they operate. The benefit that ultimately come from this is all of their different data systems, their roadside technology, the cameras, the transponder readers, the lights, the sensors that monitor the fans. Instead of being connected all through different applications, they'll all be able to be monitored together in the cloud and result in a significant savings for their day-to-day operations as well.
Perfect. That's really helpful. And that's a great case study for us as well, because sometimes that upfront investment is paid back literally 6 months or a year in, and it really changes the way people think about what can be done. All right, Jeff, we're going back to you. What have you seen as the biggest barriers to successful smart cities initiatives? If you can kind of walk us through a case study around what can go wrong, even when the technology is solid, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I would say there's been a lot of barriers, partly just because every city kind of has their own uniques and wants. And I think we've kind of tiptoed around some of them so far in this discussion, but I mean, one is obviously the technology is not the silver bullet for smart communities. It's data, but then also, you know, ensuring that the data collected derives meaning and kind of accurate decision making for city leaders. And I would say the other aspect is kind of you know, thinking small and scaling up. You know, when you talk about cities, it's kind of easy to kind of think about, you know, what's in the future, kind of how, you know, the Jetsons, if you will, in terms of kind of what the future will look like. But the reality is that cities are very organic and constantly evolving. And so the opportunity for leadership in terms of city and also in the private sector is to address, you know, problems and identify solutions incrementally. When you kind of talk about, you know, the bus app for my city of Miami, there's 3 different transit authorities for kind of regional or inner city transit within the Miami-Dade area and connecting cities. And, you know, talking about ridership, you have a metro area of about 7 million people, and about half a million people are using that on an annual basis. So there's a strong opportunity to transition a lot of that, automotive traffic to public transportation just through kind of the simple deployment of an app, and making mobility within the city environment more accessible, more easy to use, and that can translate into some significant wins and kind of reduce some of the automotive usage within a metro area. Additionally, I would say, Miami, or City of Miami, has been at the forefront of addressing some of its resiliency issues that was brought up by Art a little bit ago and highlighted by Phil. Global warming is an issue. Miami is a coastal city. There's rising sea tides. And so in terms of kind of addressing that one singular problem, that can have a dramatic impact in terms of the economic growth and stability of the greater Miami area. And so addressing kind of small, particular problems, iterating on them, I think is kind of the biggest measure for success, because it's not going to come overnight for cities.
Thank you, Jeff. That was really helpful. And I think taking that big picture approach and then parsing it down into little manageable pieces. I mean, again, having that big splash about an initiative is really fun and gets headlines, but those little tiny wins and the layering effect of managing the product and the project in that way makes all the difference at the end. So, having professionals like you thinking those things through with people, it makes all the difference. That was extremely helpful. Next up, Angel, we're going to start with you. To many people, as we addressed earlier, it seems like smart city projects are really expensive, and it's not always clear what the long-term ROI could be. And so, we already tackled a few of the metrics that make sense in designing projects and developing them, and this phased approach that Jeff just talked about. Can you give us an example of cost savings and efficiencies that you found, and really kind of go through how to determine making the most out of taking on an initiative like this so that all the stakeholders can just jump in with both feet?
Thanks, Susan. I'll try to be as precise as possible. And like Jeffrey said, sometimes just having the correct amount of information to the correct people to make the correct decision can make a huge impact. And it has to be very small. We just have to provide the information correctly. So we have a particular case. I'm naturally from Venezuela, and it's a country that's going through a very, very bad economic situation. And there's complicated, very, very complicated communication between the private sector and the government sector. So what we did is that we selected one of the airports in Venezuela, and we gave them all our products basically for free. And they've been operating them for the last couple of years. And I have to say, like Jeffrey said, sometimes just little things and using little mobile apps and the ways that we use Amazon Web Service to connect all of our applications can make a really big difference. In this airport, for example, maintenance was really, really bad. And it was also because the return was not appropriate. I mean, because they weren't doing invoicing correctly. It was taking too long from what an airline would pay for, the landing fees or their actual passenger fees or whatever. So they weren't able to collect the fees on time, and they wouldn't be able to make the correct decisions and do the maintenance correctly. So with part of our solutions that really were not necessarily costly, because we gave them basically for free. And it was mostly just mobile applications and Amazon Web Services. And we reduced or we incremented in more than 40% per year, because now instead of getting paid every 45 or 60 days, they were getting paid weekly because they were more efficient on their invoicing. They were more efficient on the payment solutions that they had, and they were able to divert the money to where it had to go and make the airport a safer place. So basically, it's like Jeffrey said, it doesn't have to be, for an airport to be smart, for a city to be smart, it doesn't have to have a huge infrastructure. It doesn't have to have 5G technology yet. We can start by doing little things with the technology that we have, the connectivity that we have today, and it has to be flexible, like I said before. When technology gets better, we'll improve. Perfect. But sometimes just doing little things can make a big difference. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you. And over to our city manager of the City of Miami, Art, can you give us some examples about all the things you guys have been doing that are really focused on a long-term ROI, but not at a great cost to start it off?
Well, there isn't any bigger long-term ROI than coming out of this pandemic in terms of the economic recovery of the city, right? In terms of managing that. One of the things that we're currently engaged in is a partnership with both Google and MasterCard. Google is helping us develop a platform or a dashboard to really assist us with the real-time sort of recovery matrix or metrics that we can actually use to really target resources for the recovery in terms of what industry sectors we might apply some of our resources, because they are limited, right? So we know we'll have resources available. We've had them already. But how can we leverage those in a way that they have the biggest impact? And MasterCard is really providing to us all that business activity data so that we understand what industry, what sectors, what areas of our local economy are improving faster, right? And there's a direct correlation to the resources we put in and then being able to evaluate that recovery effort in terms of scale. So that's one of the kind of key things we're working on in terms of recovery. Another one is a sort of a long-term opportunity in terms of the ROI is really about quality of life, and that's curbside management. So one of the things that we are sort of up against in terms of an ever-evolving landscape is the impacts to our right-of-way as it relates to autonomous vehicles, rideshare, parcel delivery, food delivery, regular vehicle, pedestrian pickup and drop off. All of those have impacts to our right-of-way that in the past, really all we had was loading zones and parking spaces, right? And in another 10 years, that's not going to be the case. And so as all these different demand generators impact the right-of-way and our ability to manage the curb, those all have impacts to traffic and impact to future development. So one of the things that we're really focused on is some sort of real innovative changes to our zoning code, our Miami 21 code, that are going to address some of those long-term in terms of future projects and how they're developed. And also obviously addressing sort of the impacts that the right-of-way has. And in the past our sort of willingness to give some of that right-of-way up and not do it so that we can address future impacts. We have a current relationship with Ford, who's got a very robust autonomous vehicle program embedded in the city now, with the intent that they're going to have a autonomous car service sort of in place by 2022. So those are all things that we're really, really excited about and have, I think, real tangible returns for us. Sometimes they're not monetary, sometimes they're really directed more towards quality of life and livability metrics.
Thank you so much. Phil, if you can answer fast, I'd love to hear from your perspective if you have a great example.
Really, really fast about immediate ROI. And this comes from using existing infrastructure at the edge, which is one of the capabilities that the cloud can bring. The city of Detroit used AWS to resolve traffic problems in less than 2 hours instead of 8 hours, reduce travel times by 30%, and improve emergency response time by 20%. Detroit is the largest and most populous city in Michigan with 670,000 residents. And what they did was implemented a remote traffic management system based on MyVision Traffic Link, which runs on Amazon. And without having to replace communications infrastructure or camera infrastructure, they were able to use the cloud to get more from the data that they were already collecting with significant improvements in the city. And every one of those has a cost to the citizens of Detroit that they appreciate in terms of a better quality of life.
Excellent. So last question for all panelists. If there's one bit of information that you want people to walk away from this session with so that they can be big advocates for smart cities initiatives and think through what we can all do directly to support our South Florida community, we're going to start with Jeff. What's your 1-minute recommendation or learning takeaway?
lightning round version, partner and align, both internally and externally. I think the complexity of smart cities, the uniqueness in terms of the needs that are specific to every single community require both internal alignment between agencies, departments, locally, even at a state level at times, to address problems, share resources, you know, one solution could be kind of the other party's kind of, you know, dire need solution, but you know, they're interconnected. And then on the external side of things, I mean, you know, Cisco, AWS here on the line, Comcast as well. You know, these are all kind of you know, partners within kind of the entirety of the delivery of smart city solutions. Crown is not in a position to go at it alone. Neither is AWS or Cisco. So great opportunity to kind of work together collaboratively, both on the public and private sector side of things.
I'd love to know what the ROI of this panel is, because if you're not already all working together, now you have direct linkages forever. So that's going to be a fun extra value add from the GMCC this year. Amri, let's hear from you.
I think if you think about it, the impact of the technology, what I have seen is that in some places, because you have the automotive companies in one specific area, it's very common, for example, to develop all the ecosystem and the innovation associated to the automotive industry on that physical area. The same for mining, agriculture. So if you go across the world, there are hotspots in innovation because of the adoption of the technology on that specific place. I think that cities, we have the opportunity to make the city an area that we can experience the technology, that we can try, and then we can eventually develop the innovation in the city. I think Miami, it's well positioned to develop not only the technology to make the city more efficient, but also all the entrepreneurship associated. And why not to have the next startup for smart city, in some sense coming from Miami, because Miami may be embracing the smart city approach.
That's a very important piece. And I loved what Art said earlier, where they just have to make it accessible and get out of the way. So I'm looking forward to hearing Art following up on that. We're going to go to Phil next. Phil, what's your one takeaway you want people to think about leaving this event today?
So to Jeff's point, we're already all interconnected. We all know each other, because none of us can do what we're doing to enable smart cities without some component that the other delivers. And my challenge to cities is think big. Don't be constrained by how we've done things for the past 20 years. Really dive deep and take a look at what new technologies are now here to enable them to achieve objectives that have been pipe dreams up to now, but there are now solid case studies on all of our websites that talk to cities succeeding.
Great. Art, what do you have to say to that challenge Phil just posed?
Well, that's a challenge I certainly embrace, and I would really really encourage, if from a community perspective, really engage your elected officials, understand what their platform, their vision is from a smart city perspective, because if they don't have one, then you ought to really reconsider your support of them. I think, you know, we really need to kind of push a lot of our elected officials to see that in a broader perspective. You know, we have a responsibility as a city to really push community engagement a great deal. And one of the things that we don't ever want to do, and it's been a focus, I know at the city in particular, as it relates to infrastructure, is make sure that we don't leave some of our sort of poor, more disenfranchised neighborhoods like Overtown, Liberty City, Little Havana out of the network, right? They need to have access in as much of a resource as our downtown core, our business centers do. We want to have a very robust whole infrastructure from an information and technology standpoint, and community engagement is going to be a big part of that and allow us to sort of message that. So all of our partners that are on this on the panel, you know, we want to make sure that we don't leave any holes to our infrastructure, especially the city.
Thank you. Last but not least, Angel.
Well, I just want to say one thing, and to all the audience and anybody listening to this and watching this, that don't be afraid about the barriers. okay? Don't be afraid to innovate, okay? It's called innovation precisely because it hasn't been done before. Any little thing, there's hundreds of things that are still not taken care of, that anybody in the audience and the city, the citizens, that they've seen problems, that they don't be afraid of the barriers you might find. Just get up and innovate and get in touch with any of these guys. Because I mean, one little thing can really make a big difference.
So we have fantastic questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to read questions. We'll have one or two people answer, but very quickly because we want to get through as many of these as possible. So let's start. Amri, I'd love for you to take this first one. Do we have the right infrastructure in place? 5G, smart buildings, traffic control. Without this, we cannot have the connectivity in place, right?
I think that the connectivity comes exactly to unlock the possibilities, right? I think that we have evolved a lot in the connectivity. We still have some work to do, but I think that it's much better than 5 years ago. I mean, the major problem I don't see in the connectivity, the major problem is that we talked a lot about one specific solution, starting small. I think that the problem to solve now is how you make that data available so then the government, the city can correlate data from one application to another. I think that's the major challenge that we are living. Connectivity, it's not perfect, but it's not a big problem.
Great, that's perfect. So I'm going to ask Phil and Jeff if you could each succinctly answer, what cities nationally do you consider smart today? And what does it look like? What does success look like for Miami to be considered smart? So Phil, let's start with you.
Wow, that's really putting me on the spot.
Yes, sir. I knew you could handle it.
So, you know, smart cities embraces a lot of different elements. It covers utilities, public safety, health and human services, telecommunications, transportation. There's probably 6 or 7 more areas that all have to be integrated to be a smart city. And to be honest, I'm not sure that anybody has hit the mother lode so far. In London, they've done amazing things opening up data sets so that people can embrace life in that city in a way that is both smart and helpful. But I don't know that they've scored the home run yet. You know, I look at cities like Miami and the examples I gave earlier, Columbus, Los Angeles, New York, and there are smaller city examples as well, like Detroit, and each one of them are taking steps to make their cities smarter. Someday when all of these things come together, somebody will be able to put on that crown.
Jeff, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm based in Denver, Colorado, so I'm a little biased, but I would say, you know, in terms of what is smart, I mean, there's the kind of tangible in the sense of, you know, sensor networks and data collection. But I would also say that it's also a mindset. You know, cities that are willing to embrace innovative, creative solutions, those are smart cities in the sense that they have leadership that's willing to kind of tackle these challenges. And I think, you know, from speaking to some of my colleagues, I mean, Miami has actually, you know, had a big success out of, you know, one aspect of COVID in the sense that, you know, Miami gets hit by a lot of hurricanes. It's used to having its infrastructure out. It's used to having schools closed. So there was already in place a solution to digital divide in terms of remote learning with access, you know, notebooks, laptops for students already in play. And so I would say there's a lot of challenges out there that cities have faced yesterday, today, and they will tomorrow. But what really is going to make them smart is their ability to address them in a creative way and really kind of solve some of these more complex, wicked problems.
That's a great positive to come out of all of this, that we did have a little bit of a level of preparedness beyond. So thanks for reminding us of that. Sometimes it's hard to remember all the great things. Angel, you ready? Is
Okay.
5G robust enough to handle the bandwidth? And do you see that, do you see Smart City as more of a phased approach? But can you tackle is 5G robust enough as a question?
Was that for me or for Amri? I'm sorry.
For you. For you.
Well, I mean, in a connectivity point of view, like I was saying, in talking about airports and ports and what we can do to improve their smartness or to make them smarter, I don't really think that right now you need to have a 5G infrastructure. Like Amri said earlier, it is not the best that we can have today. I mean, it's like computers. You have quantum computers that are capable of doing millions and thousands of millions of operations at the same time. But in Amazon Web Services, you don't need a quantum computer to make good things happen. So I would say that really for right now, to make or to start in projects and to start innovating, like Jeffrey says, to put in place different things or to be prepared for different events in case of events, you don't have to have that high-end latest technology in order to implement or in order to promote a smart city initiative or a smart city application or just a small thing that can make really a big change.
Can I chime in on that?
I was actually gonna go to Amri next, but then I'd love to have you weigh in on this because there's so much hype, rightly so in some ways, about 5G. So what will 5G facilitate if it's not needed for smart cities?
Well,
Amri.
I think that 5G is going to be more bandwidth for sure. So depending on the application, you are going to need that. So let's imagine, for example, connected buses. We're going to be better off with 5G than 4G or 3G for sure. Right now, there is a demand for video and things like that. And the only way to connect things in movement will be with a cellular network. So connected buses, no doubt, 5G, way to go. When we think about some sensors that are powered by battery that may last 10 years, you have to be efficient on the energy consumption. So cellular connectivity is not the best fit. So you have a LoRa or any sort of different flavors of connectivity. It's low power networks that has a better fit. For environmental sensors, for example, float systems and things like that, that's the way to go. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a combination of 5G with all the other options that we have. There is no one fits all. That's the point.
Great. Jeff, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I would say, this conversation would not be happening as it is right now 30 years ago. I mean, if we were all on 56K modems, we would not be able to have this Zoom platform as it is right now. And in terms of kind of technology and innovation over the last 60 years, a lot of folks talk about Moore's Law, kind of this constant compounding of compute power. And all of that translates into more bandwidth and the requirement for connectivity. So when you talk about kind of, 4G networks today, 5G networks today, and tomorrow, assuming that, Ford and their Cruise platform, deploys an autonomous vehicle solution within, the city of Miami, all of a sudden you're starting to talk about, vehicles that are unmanned around the street, and the network performance in terms of latency and throughput for those devices is going to be incredibly important in terms of the safety and also the accessibility of those vehicles. So 5G, beyond just kind of the throughput, so more bandwidth, comes out with a lot of different kind of solutions for specific applications. So talking about unmanned vehicles, spectrum slicing, so the ability to provision a dedicated kind of wireless connection that is more the fast lane for some of those more critical applications becomes an added feature of 5G network buildouts.
All right, Art, get ready, man. There are so many questions for you, sir. So first of all, can you give us any update on what's happening with the 5G rollout in Miami? And secondly, what's the plan for Miami to work with surrounding areas as far as permitting and building in the infrastructure to bring in more smart solutions?
So from a 5G perspective, in terms of the rollout, it's in progress. Obviously, I referenced to it before, one of the commitments we made was to facilitate the permitting process to make the infrastructure installation quicker. A lot of the various communication companies are obviously doing it, independent, and we're trying to make sure we work with them as as much as we can. We don't have an internal infrastructure already built in. A lot of, obviously the light fixtures is an example, which is a platform they use. We don't own, they're owned by the utility company. So our job really is just to kind of get out of their way, make sure that they can get through whatever process we have in front of them from a permitting perspective and get it done quick. But it's active, and one of the things that we're also trying to make sure we do from a utility perspective as well is we are doing a lot of road work and a lot of street work. We want to make sure that if we're digging up a road for improvements, that we've communicated that to all of our utility companies. If we have an opportunity to improve whatever infrastructure is necessary underneath that roadway, we want to do it once, right? We want to have sort of a dig once mindset, which is, let's open it up. Let's make sure everybody, if there's some improvement that needs to be made within that, specific geography, we want to make sure they're in there doing it, so that once we close that road out and improve that street, we've already provided that lane, that right of way, and made it available to them. I got so lost in that, I don't even remember what the back end of your question.
But can I compliment on that, Susan? For example,
sure,
I agree with Jeffrey. 5G, it's going to bring new possibilities, but let's take the electrical meters that we have in our home in Miami. FPL right now is using a RF mesh, and they are not going to replace because they don't need more bandwidth. So my message is that it's going to be a combination. 5G bringing new possibilities, but it's not one fits all. It's going to be a combination of all the different flavors, let's say, in networking.
5G is just one of many wireless technologies that in total can be leveraged for smart city applications. That's
it's
exactly
the best
right.
Branded. They have killed that branding. So it's a buzz. Everyone's a buzz with the excitement for 5G. All right, we have time for one more question super fast. I'll let whoever starts talking first answer it. We're just gonna have chaos right now. How do technology providers in Miami engage with smart cities efforts? So what's the call to action? How can people join our cause? And nobody's answering. Jeff, go.
Join the cause. I would say I love the comment that Art made in terms of talking to the city representatives what their smart city platform is. Quite honestly, I don't think I've ever heard of a city representative really talk about that. It's more of kind of an opportunistic, is there grant funding kind of opportunity to go chase, and that provokes the conversation. But I think in terms of kind of a lot of the issues and stresses that are happening right now, it's a perfect conversation, because there's a lot of technical or technological innovation happening that's changing the world, and there's a lot of economic stressors that are happening, and I think it's important for cities to kind of address it holistically.
Well, on behalf of the Greater Miami Chamber, it's been my honor to thank all of you for this incredible panel. It's been so much fun. And now I'm going to pass it back to Juan Carlos Gutierrez, the chair of the GMCC Technology and Innovation Committee. Thank you, sir. And thank you to all of you. What a great conversation.
Thank you.
JC. Baton.
Sorry about that. Finally, got it. Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you everyone for this great panel. I just want to summarize some takeaways that I got. First of all, Miami is already applying these type of technologies in scooters, trolley, FPL, as Ambry said, at the airport authority. So is becoming smarter every day, okay? And is applying these technologies. We have to align internally and externally, collaborate, make teamwork if we want to achieve a smarter city. It's not a responsibility for one company or one government entity. It's a responsibility for all of us. We need to think big, dive deep, and don't constrain with the realities that we have today. Think about the future, think about a smarter city. Push elected officials so they can do more with the community engagement. And finally, I will say, a smart city is not a final destination, it is a journey. And we are all invited to participate in that journey. Thank you very much, all the panel. Thank you, all the participants, and thank you, the sponsors, for this great opportunity participating at the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.